In this episode, I am going to argue that the appeal to authority fallacy ought to be renamed to appeal to disputed authority or some other such name, because appeal to authority by itself is not a fallacy. Consider the following question. How do I know that London really exists? Here are some answers. Other people tell me so. I read it in books. I see it marked on maps. I see it on television. I read about it on the internet. But I've never been there. I don't really know that London is a real place that really exists apart from all these sources. For all I know, these sources could all be lying, and London could be an imaginary fictional city that is related to Sherlock Holmes in the same way that Gotham is related to Batman. The only way that I actually know that London exists and could prove it to you is by appealing to an authority, like other people, books, maps, television, or the internet. These are all authorities. In this way, it is by authority that we know just about everything that we know. Even in the case of our own direct, personal, individual sensation, we are trusting the authority of our own senses and memory. So some appeal to authority is always going to be somewhere behind any argument we could ever even conceivably make. Whether the authority is sound or unsound, all valid arguments will need to appeal to some authority somewhere to get their premises, which is also called faith. So, it isn't a fallacy for your argument to appeal to an authority. It is a fallacy for it not to. To fail to appeal to some authority for your premises would be a genuine fallacy. For example, and this is a real example that has actually happened to me, an internet atheist claims that the Bible says something which most people, including most Christians, would regard as absurd. No doubt they got this from some atheist website, but they don't give a reference. So my response is, no, the Bible doesn't say that. In fact, it says the opposite. In book, chapter, verse, it says blah, blah, blah. And the response I get back is, your logical fallacy is appeal to authority, because I appealed to what the Bible says as an authority on a question about what the Bible says. It really takes a special kind of stupid to be on the bottom tier of internet atheists. It is very common to see appeal to authority in lists of logical fallacies, and many people take it to mean that they get to say appeal to authority in a dispute as if that somehow discredited the other side's facts. But of course, they never want that done to their own facts. The people writing the fallacy sites know that letting this appeals to authorities are fallacious idea loose is going to quickly spin out of control if they aren't careful in a direction that would be very disadvantageous for their own views, which tend toward the general direction of scientism or the goals of logical positivism. Letting this fallacy loose on the world without their wording it very carefully would discredit these goals as well. They want the minions of their side to be able to use the claim of appeal to authority as a fallacy to discredit the other side's facts without the other side getting to use it to discredit their side's facts. So they couch their explanation of the alleged fallacy in doublespeak, which is infused with their controversial ideology, as I will show in a moment. But first, I need to explain why this is bad. It's bad because fallacy theory should be something everyone agrees on before having a debate. If it includes anything that should be in the actual debate, like the atheist ideas of empiricism, naturalism, materialism, determinism, epistemological skepticism, positivism, scientism, etc., or the religious people's ideas of supernaturalism or God existing or the Bible being true or creationism, etc., then we lose the utility of fallacy theory as a universal bridge across ideological disagreements about these things to facilitate constructive debate about these things. Fallacy theory should only serve to stop arguments which all concerned parties agree in principle are bad, like how everyone agrees on the fallacy of 4 terms. Not to stop arguments only one side will think are bad in principle. Settling big questions in philosophy should need actual debate, not just finding an idea you don't like and labeling it fallacious simply because your ideology disagrees with it. Now, to show how one of the fallacy sites is doing this, it says, quote, "You said that because an authority thinks something, it must therefore be true," unquote. My response? Yes, I did. I did this on the grounds that this authority would be in a position to know. For example, you could ask, "Do you believe in Santa Claus, little girl?" And she'd reply, "Yes." So next you would ask, "Why do you believe in Santa Claus, little girl?" And she'd reply, "Because Mommy told me so." Now, philosophically speaking, that is an entirely valid argument. Mommy says Santa Claus is real. Mommy would be expected to know about such things and not to lie about them. Therefore, Santa Claus must be real. Children are often much more rational than adults. There is nothing wrong with the logic of this little girl's argument. Nothing that belongs in the category of fallacy theory has any business disputing with her on this point, because her conclusion does follow logically from her premises. You'd have to go outside fallacy theory into some other discipline to dispute this point. You'd have to argue with her premises, not just say that's a fallacy. The same applies to when global warming alarmists cite the, quote, scientific consensus, unquote. There's nothing wrong with the logic of their argument. Scientists say that harmful but preventable anthropogenic global warming is real. Scientists would be in a position to know, and we'd assume wouldn't lie. Therefore, harmful but preventable anthropogenic global warming must be real. It's not a scientific argument because it appeals to the authority of the opinions of the scientists instead of to the authority of their scientific research, but it is a logically valid argument apart from its claiming to be scientific. There are lots of non-scientific and even anti-scientific, which is not the same thing, arguments which have perfect validity, but only lack soundness, and debunking those is a matter for the natural sciences, not for fallacy theory. Or in other words, we need to dispute these things a posteriori, not a priori. We need to be disputing these things after experience, not before experience. We need to be disputing these things on a case-by-case basis, not on a categorical basis. We need to be disputing whether a specific authority is legitimate or illegitimate, not saying appeal to authority as if all authorities were automatically illegitimate, except for our side's authorities, of course. Look at the next sentence of theirs. Quote, "It's important to note that this fallacy should not be used to dismiss the claims of experts or scientific consensus." Now, let's think about this for a second. I wonder which scientific consensus they might be referring to. Sorry, no. My examples about Santa Claus and about global warming are a package deal. As far as argumentation theory is concerned, they're the same type of argument. They're either both fallacious or both not. They don't have to be both true or both false, but they are either both fallacious or both not fallacious. There can be no special rules within argumentation and fallacy theory about who gets to count as a genuine expert authority and who doesn't. That's the business of epistemology, philosophy of science, and various other disciplines that come in as part of the debate, where fallacy theory is supposed to be acceptable before the debate. Fallacy theory, like justice, has to be blind to this sort of special consideration if it's going to apply universally across all relevant ideologies. The alleged fallacy of appeal to authority is an abuse of fallacy theory designed to smuggle in questionable assumptions about who gets to count as an expert and who doesn't. They go on. Appeals to authority are not valid arguments, but nor is it reasonable to disregard the claims of experts who have a demonstrated depth of knowledge unless one has a similar level of understanding. Or in other words, appealing to authority is not a valid argument, but you should blindly accept it anyway whenever our side is doing it. They go on, quote, however, missing comma, it is, incorrect comma, entirely possible that the opinion of a person or institution of authority is wrong. Therefore, the authority that such a person or institution holds does not have any intrinsic bearing upon whether their claims are true or not. Unquote. In other words, just because some authority says something is true doesn't mean that thing is true, except when it totally does. You can ask people to cite peer-reviewed research, and you can ask people not to appeal to authority, but you can't do both. Citing research is appealing to authority. This doesn't mean that every authority is just as good as every other. Some are bad. The question of whether some authority is good or bad is often very much part of what people argue about in debates. But assuming that it's bad just because it's an authority shuts down discussion. It does not facilitate open debate, and that's what fallacy theory is supposed to be for. When people claim appeal to authority as a fallacy, and a genuine fallacy is going on, it will generally be better described as a different fallacy, such as begging the question, affirming the consequent, or flat out non sequitur. Not every fallacy has to have a specific named description. If, for example, some evangelical says, Jesus rose from the dead because the Bible says so, it doesn't help matters for an atheist to respond, you're appealing to an authority. That's a fallacy. It would be better to say, you're begging the question. It doesn't follow that a thing is true from the premise that the Bible says that thing, at least not without assuming that the Bible is true. Then they give this last line, which kind of gives their game away. Quote, example, not able to defend his position that evolution, quote, isn't true, unquote, Bob says that he knows a scientist who also questions evolution, parentheses, and presumably isn't a primate, close parentheses, unquote. I might say first that I'm not interested in defending creationism here. I'm interested in defending clear and valid argumentation. And this example of theirs shows why it's clear this alleged fallacy of theirs is ideologically skewed. They are defining this fallacy so that their side on the issue of creation versus evolution can appeal to scientists, but the other side would be committing a fallacy if they appealed to scientists. Their definition is now 3 levels deep. First, it's okay to question all authority. That's the first level. Then the second level, it's not okay to question the authority of scientists. But then we have a third level, it's okay to question the authority of unpopular scientists. And my response is, no, you don't get to go 3 levels deep. You have to actually argue with these creationists. You don't get to make special exceptions and then special exceptions to your special exceptions of your fallacy description to define your own side as right and define the other side as wrong before the debate starts. If it's okay to appeal to any authorities, including the authority of evidence, then appeal to authority is not a fallacy.